Hi everybody, Christina Heimstead here to talk about money and financial education and filling in the gap that we don't always get in school, and being more educated about personal money management, especially in our society, semi-capitalistic, whatever you want to call it. First and foremost, talking about some financial news. We did not get Prop 5, nor did we get Prop 10, so that has slightly impacted things. Interest rates are going up fractionally. That's slowing down our market a little bit here. I've got a blog post about it. I'll include a link about that, talking a little bit about affordability, and maybe that's something I'll go over another time. But by and large, things have slowed a little bit in terms of the real estate housing market. There still seems to be some decent activity in the income property market. I think that's mostly surrounding the fact that we've got higher interest rates and people can purchase property at slightly lower rates as a result of affordability. So although the interest on each individual purchase is more, your property taxes are slightly reduced if everything's kind of slowing down a bit. So we're seeing a lot more movement kind of in that vicinity. The feeding frenzy that was surrounding first-time home buyers has slowed down pretty significantly. But that's about it for housing. Things are a little quiet as we go into the holidays here. Pretty typical, but today I wanted to talk a little bit about appreciation and depreciation. Talked a bit about credit scores. I've talked a bit about interest rates. Understanding the value of appreciation versus depreciation, though, definitely contributes somewhat to our conversation in regards to interest rates. And part of the reason why this is something important to me is oftentimes people compare purchasing a car and purchasing a home, because they're two very large purchases that people often make. Outside of purchasing a business, I can't think of anything off the top of my head immediately here that's comparable in that vicinity. Those are typically, a car and a house are typically the largest purchases you're going to make, like I said, outside of purchasing a business, which could be less than a car, more than a car, more than a house. The significance of talking about this is I know an awful lot of people who decide to purchase cars, which not good for you. Not, some people decide that that's the route they want to go. What people fail to remember is purchasing a car. It's not typical to buy a car and own it for 5 years and watch it go from your purchase rate of, hypothetically, we'll say $20,000, to all of a sudden that car, after you driving it for 5 years, is now going to be worth $20,000 or more. Typically, the more wear and tear on a car, the lower it reduces the overall price of that asset. Either because there's less potential usability out of that car because of the miles that you've put on it, or because of the motor that's on, just the general wear and tear. You're asking a lot of people to depend on the fact that you were a good car owner who changed the oil, changed the brake pads, changed the tire, and did all these things. It's not to say that those can't be resolved and remedy some of these things, but it's just not typical. The times that you see a car appreciate is when it's some sort of commodity, some sort of collector's car. And we all hope that we are smart enough to purchase a car such as that. But typically it's not true. The other thing too is that typically you're making it your daily driver, and that it's just not that common. I mean, the cars that have been successful are, like, I had a client who purchased a Defender, and I think he bought it for like 15, 20 grand. During the middle of the recession, nobody had cash to go out and burn money on a 20-year-old car at that point. But that's a car that he's driven some and has gone up significantly in value. But that's a special car. It's something people are really into, and it's just different. You can also look at cars like a Ford Pinto. I mean, those were just exceptional death traps. And they might hold some sort of nostalgia for people, but it's not something that's going to increase in value. Or there are some Porsches that I've seen that still do pretty well. I think it might be because they were still manuals. They're still speedsters. There's a dealership here that has one that's older for a significant amount of money, and I can't really figure out why. This is where we get beyond my car knowledge. I like cars, but this is where there may be gaps in my education, at least in terms of cars. But by and large, cars depreciate in value. So for somebody who is trying to be financially conservative and protect their money, like, unless you plan on basically burning the car, and that's to say that if you were to purchase that car for the said $20,000 and make all the payments, in that time you have to change the tire, change the oil, change what have you. You also have to take into account how long's the term of the loan there. You will get to a point where you're upside down in that car, where you've paid more for that car than you owe on it. And I think that's where a lot of people fail to walk away, because they feel like they've already spent this much money, and then they go to try to list their car and sell their car, and they can't do it because they want the same amount of money that they've spent on the car. So kind of being careful to be aware of that line is pretty important. And everybody's different, but you just have to know kind of what the parameters are that you're dealing with there, and know maybe going into getting the car what it's going to be like. The other thing about that is obviously you have to manage all the maintenance on the car, as opposed to when you lease, where you just get a new car. I've leased the last couple cars here, and I don't have to think about it. It's just show up to the dealership, the light's on, do something about it. They do. I did not opt for, they had some sort of tire care package. Personally, drive pretty fast around the corners. I go through tires pretty quickly, and I knew I was going to, so I didn't opt for that. But by and large, in terms of the maintenance, it's pretty easy, and you kind of have a solid expectation of what your ongoing monthly payment is. But I think a lot of people look at buying a car as an asset of, hey, I've got this thing, I've spent some money, it's pretty cool, or what have you. And a lot of people don't realize that you're probably not going to see that money back. So when I see these people who are getting these super flashy, nice cars, it's great, but the likelihood that you'll get that's more or less just money that you're just saying goodbye to. And if you want that lifestyle and you are perfectly comfortable taking that on, and you're not expecting anything in return, and you know that that's money going out the door that you're not going to see again, fine. But I think there are certain mental perspectives that people ought to take when they're evaluating cars, and understanding that it's a depreciating asset as opposed to an appreciating asset. Whereas a house, hopefully, is different. Just a second. House, on the other hand, is much more akin to the stock market. It tends to fluctuate with the market. Now, there are times when you get new construction and there's a certain premium that you pay to have been the first person to live there. And there is some value to that, but oftentimes after you've moved in, it's a little bit like driving the car off the lot. It was brand new, and now it's not. And when it's no longer brand new, you lose some of that new shiny value that you had in the property, and all of a sudden it's joining the masses in terms of the overall scheme of things. So it's being compared to other like properties as opposed to this unique new construction situation. And the reason I bring this up is there's a lot of new construction going on around here. There are several companies in particular, one of which that stands out to me most is Taylor Morrison. Taylor Morrison has built these 3-story mixed-use properties all throughout the city. By and large, it's been in Costa Mesa, but there's an awful lot of them. I wish I knew what the exact volume was that they've added since. It's probably been since 2010, sometime during the early recession. And the reason I bring up them is I know somebody who bought one, and oftentimes what happens, especially with these that maybe aren't quite finished yet and you have the options to pick all your finishings, is it's dependent on the fact that you have good taste. Let's face it, not everybody does. Because at the end of the day, you have to make yours saleable. The problem is the likelihood that you're going to purchase that property, live there for X number of years, and die in that property is probably pretty low. I know that's awfully morbid, but it's pretty low. So at some point, your property is going to join the overall market. And it's important to take into account how many there are. So when you go to list yours and you're comparing your property against other like properties for pricing or what have you, there's a lot of inventory. So getting yours to stand out as this unique, exciting property can be challenging. Not including the fact that, going back to the design element, when you first purchase the property, it's set at price A. And then as you continue to add on all the bells and whistles, whatever those finishings might be, when I say finishings, I mean countertops, tile, flooring, cabinets, the whole rigmarole. Basically everything that makes it a house. So for instance, I know somebody who bought one thinking it was going to be like $800,000-$900,000. By the time he was done designing it, it was valued at over $1 million for the purchase price. The construction was severely delayed. It was a whole thing. The biggest concern to me for somebody like him is they're still building this stuff. He's been in for maybe a year and they're still building like crazy. And the challenge with that is that just means that there's more volume being added. The pricing isn't going up that much. It's kind of staying more or less the same for the new construction purchase. And then those who turn around to try to sell theirs are taking a slight... If they can sell for what they paid for the place, I would consider that a win. And maybe it's fine. Maybe you move out and you convert it to income property and you rent it, for as much as you possibly can. For as long as you can. I have a client who's doing that. This is his first place. Got upside down in it. He's just been renting it. He feeds it a little bit every month. But by and large, it's, it hasn't been the end of the world. But something like that is what I would call a blend of appreciation and depreciation. Because for the first X number of years, that property is incrementally depreciating, because it's a little bit like a new car where you drive it off the lot all of a sudden you're the one living there, you're kind of giving it some love in terms of wear and tear. Not unlike a renter, not unlike somebody who's got a new car. And then at some point you join the overall marketplace. Typically it's when they stop building the same type of construction. And at that point, you kind of bottom out in terms of your depreciation, and all of a sudden you should go back to your appreciation, not unlike cars. So the Defender back in the day, don't know what it was valued at. I'm sure it was probably pretty darn close to what my client paid for his when he first bought it, and now he's just making money off of it. So if he bought it from the original owner, and it was one owner, that original owner was probably pretty lucky to get out for probably more or less what he paid for it, and then he was only out the cost of maintenance, plus or minus, or hopefully made some money. Don't know. I'd have to know what those were worth when they first came out. But it's challenging sometimes. I think there are an awful lot of people who just want to get a place, move in, and be done. But the value in getting someplace that needs a little bit of TLC is that there's inherent sweat equity that you can apply that gets that to appreciate sooner rather than later. And you get a much better rate of return on your money, typically. And it's the concept behind buying the ugliest house on the block. So buying in the best neighborhood and getting the worst house. So making that stretch is good for your investment. Because the reality is, chances are it's probably not going to get any worse than that property, so can only go up from there. It's like buying at the very bottom of the stock market. And the stock market sees pretty similar things as well. So when you get IPOs, everybody's excited, you're trying to see what it's going to do. It's hopefully hitting the market to gain more equity and be able to do more amazing things. But it doesn't always work out that way, and oftentimes there's it's Bill O'Neill. I think it's Bill O'Neill that did IBD, Investors Business Daily. He was one who was always skeptical of IPOs and is much more inclined to wait 6 to 18 months to see how the stock actually performs, and going past all of the hype and excitement and all of that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is when you are looking at purchasing anything, understanding whether or not this asset is going to be appreciating or depreciating is very important for the sake of your expectations in terms of what and where you think your money is going to be. For instance, this person who bought this new construction Taylor Morrison project, again, like I said, if for whatever reason they turn around and decide that they want out within X number of years, and it hasn't gotten to that point where they're either net neutral or at a point where it's X number of years in and the property can appreciate kind of with the general mass like an older construction property, that's probably going to be a bit of a blow. Now, it will have been nice and new, and there's always something that can be done. More than likely, it's to keep the property, rent it out, and move on. But it's significantly more risky than, in my opinion, than if you were to buy an older property that is already in the mass and has comps, and there's no new shiny fee that you're new shiny premium that you're paying to have that particular property. The other reason why it's important is when you buy a depreciating asset, especially if we actually are at the Fed's target of a 2% inflation, not accounting for what the stock market has done, because that's obviously done pretty well in the last decade here, as well as the real estate market. Buying a high ticket depreciating item, so for instance, if you are renting and you decide to purchase a really nice car, one of the things that kills me is watching all these people drive some used Porsche. They go down to like a used dealership and they buy some killer car. Totally impractical, awesome car, real pretty, and probably a nice little reward to yourself. Pulling into a 1-bedroom apartment with where your payment on your car is probably comparable to what you're paying in rent is personally makes me sick to my stomach, because it just means it's all money going out the door. So that's the epitome of living check to check and not really putting any money away. The irony is my dad apparently did that when he was young, and I remember my mom told me, and I think if he were to do it again today, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell he'd be doing that now. But I think he was trying to reward himself. He was having a good time. He was doing well. And he was still putting money away. I think he just felt like he didn't need anything more in terms of housing, and it was just very short-sighted planning. And I think once my brother and myself came into the picture, a lot of that changed. And maybe even earlier, but still. But yeah, it's just a bunch of money going out the door that's going towards bills, as opposed to doing something where you could be putting the money away or putting it into stocks or some sort of 401k or some sort of retirement, some sort of reserve. I know it's not flashy or fun or grand, but it's how you secure some financial stability. The reason why I mention income property markets so frequently is that that's an excellent way to do that. So it's tough to get in, but once you get in and you can do everything correctly, which is to say, hopefully you're purchasing a property that is cash flow positive, because cash flow negative is a little bit like purchasing new construction, where it's risky. It means that you're feeding an asset and you're dependent on the property appreciating. So if you can find something that cash flows appropriately, that means that either your costs are neutral or positive for the property. That means either it's just a place where you go and park money. So say you've got X number of dollars and you go purchase one of these, and then you just park your money there. And you have tenants, there's ongoing maintenance, there's stuff to do. It's not time consuming. There is stuff related to it, but it is what it is. Or you are doing all of that in conjunction with getting a paycheck every month. Some sort of net positive between your mortgage, your insurance, the income that you generate in rent. There's always those twice a year property taxes that you're going to have to take into account. But in a perfect world, you're positive after all of that is said and done. In a perfect world, you're positive, cash flow positive, and then on top of it, X number of years down the road, when you are done for whatever reason with that particular property, either you just don't want to be a landlord anymore, or you've owned it for 30 years and now you no longer get tax depreciation benefits. It essentially means that you've purchased an asset that this state more or less sees that it's going to require maintenance, so they allow you to depreciate that asset for 27 and a half years. Please talk to your accountant. He or she will give you much better details about how all this works. But it more or less caps out at 27 and a half years. But it's a nice tax break, typically. So we'll say hypothetically 30 years down the road and you turn around and you sell the property. Well, I don't think there's a single time in history where you can own something and go back 30 years and not have significant appreciation. How much it beats the overall economy varies in terms of that 2% inflation or wherever we're landing for that period of time. Typically a very conservative methodology. It's a lot less liquid than stocks, but something that works. It's typically going to appreciate, whereas that car, you don't know if you're buying the Ford Pinto or if you're buying the cool Land Rover Defender. You're kind of taking a gamble, whereas if you can get yourself to cash flow, land yourself in a good neighborhood or what have you, you can do your best. Things happen. For instance, the boom and bust of the housing market that happened, especially in the Inland Empire. You could have purchased in the best school district within 20 miles. Doesn't mean that it was going to protect you from the massive hit that we had, nor does it mean that within that 15-year time frame are you going to be back where you were. There was a report that I was reading recently that most every county in California has surpassed their pre-recession highs. I think I'm going to have to go back and take a look at this. And I'll probably include that report in either another blog post or in a link below here. But most of them are doing pretty well. However, that's not adjusted for inflation. So if we're at a 2% target and we're actually hitting that, when you adjust for inflation, most of the time markets indicate that we're closer to the 04, 05 mark. I think I've mentioned that here. So it's still doing well, but there's a difference between nominal versus adjusted for inflation, and it's where the significance of appreciation and depreciation really matters. Part of that, I think I've talked about some, is if you're saving money and you just go park it in a bank and it's not working for you, typically means that you're probably losing money, because if the market is increasing at 2% and the interest rate that you have on your bank account is less than 1%, you're losing. We've talked about that in terms of interest rates. So properties are typically appreciating assets that either perform with or outperform the general economy. Stocks are up and down. Sometimes it's a slam dunk, sometimes it's not. Stocks are significantly more liquid than housing, which is a benefit. So if you decide that for whatever reason you need that money today, you can click a button and you've got it. Whereas real estate, not quite so simple. Cars, typically depreciating assets. Not necessarily always true, but pretty typical. And most items are probably going to be depreciating assets. Businesses can appreciate, but it was like I was watching I think it's on Bravo, Lifetime, embarrassing. It's called Dirty John. Biased. It's a podcast that got started in Orange County based on a guy who was this master manipulator and attempted to murder this little girl. Lost my train of thought. Let's talk about it. House, car. Stocks, maybe business. Oh. No, it was some stupid side note. That's why I forgot about it. The oldest daughter has a safe. This guy is trying to murder this little girl. She's got an older sister. I shouldn't call her a little girl because she's in her early 20s. But she's got an older sister who's like 24, whose mom has decided to invest in very expensive purses for her daughter, or has gifted the daughter enough money, or maybe she worked to go get it. Bottom line is, this girl has very expensive bags. Birkin bags. Birkin bags are like 25, 30 grand a pop. Yes, for a handbag. A bag that a woman walks around with. Valued as much as a car. Don't get me wrong, I love clothes, love fashion. But holy hell. To burn 30 grand on a bag and sell it to yourself as an investment is absolutely insane. Don't get me wrong, bags are very helpful. They hold your stuff. They hold your wallet, your phone, your keys. For me, oftentimes, don't look in mine. I typically have a lot of receipts and a lot of trash. Not the most organized person. I'm trying to do a little better job with all that. But whatever it is that you put in a purse, hand sanitizer, maybe makeup, maybe, I don't know what people keep in bags. But this girl thought she was going to turn around and sell it. At best, maybe she can sell it for half price. And that's dependent on the fact that that bag is still in good shape. That's insane. That is getting a bag, using it for X number of years, getting some wear and tear out of it, not a whole hell of a lot, with the expectation that she just said goodbye to 5 or 10 grand to have a bag. I'm sorry. Don't see the value in that. There's actually a Freakonomics episode on waitresses and who gets better tips, and they break it all down. This might be one specific to Orange County or other comparable areas. Sometimes you can look at plastic surgery as an investment. The reason I bring this up in conjunction with the Freakonomics episode is I think they determined that blondes with bigger breasts were more financially profitable, as in they were tipped more, than, say, a smaller brunette, especially male, I think. In a scenario like that, maybe you get a good rate of return on those. Maybe not. I think it all just depends. But that might be one where it's, I mean, the implants themselves are not going to be an appreciating asset, but they might get you a return on that investment, in which case you can look at those as an appreciation for your overall income. It's where you get a little creative and maybe a little take some liberties with how some of this operates. But this, it all contributes to the overall conversation that money is a tool. And you can either use it to buy a car and purchase a depreciating asset, get yourself my family would call them enhancements. or stick-ons. Breast implants, essentially what I'm talking about. And maybe you get a return on your investment. So if they cost you 10 grand, maybe there's something that happens where you get that 10 grand back or more, in contrast to, say, buying a Birkin bag for 25 or 30 grand and never seeing that money again. Kills me because I really love clothes and fashion, and that's just one where, like, there's no amount of rationalization I can apply there, because that's an awful lot of money to say goodbye to. And unless you're somebody who just is basically pooping 25 or 30 grand a pop, it just doesn't work. It really hurt. Lastly, the house. House typically is an appreciating asset, unless you buy a new construction house. Then you gotta wait for it to join the overall masses and figure out how it stacks up in comparison. Because there's new construction premium that always gets applied to that, and that doesn't even include if you just buy it like this other guy did before adding all of the bells and whistles, because it's all the bells and whistles and all the finishings that push it kind of over the edge in terms of the pricing. But it's important to note the comparison. Like, if you're in that position of, I can get a new car, or I can continue to drive my old car and then get a more expensive house, or more whatever it is. Take a trip, do something else. It's important to look and see how your money is going to work. I mean, we work out, we try to stay active, we try to stay healthy. There's no reason why your money can't do the same. But it's a little bit like babysitting. You gotta coach it, make sure it goes the right direction, but it's on you to make that decision and determine what you want to do with it. And if for whatever reason, living with a nice car and a small apartment is the way you want to go, that's up to you. It's your prerogative. It's the wonderful freedom that we all have. But that's part of the reason why I wanted to start talking about this, is that I think there's an awful lot of people who don't understand that there are differences that way, and how it impacts your financial position, success, etc. in the future is pretty powerful. And it could be the difference between, I mean, if you're, say you decide to opt for like the killer Porsche, say you're making good money, and you decide that you want to go out and get a Panamera. I think those are like $1,200 a month, just to lease, not even to own. And you're in a place, the reason why I bring this up in particular was there was one condo that we had with 4 girls in it, and I swear they were all driving cars that were valued at like, we'll say, 1/10 of what the property was worth. Drove me nuts. We pull up and this girl's driving a Range Rover, renting a room in a house that was valued at best $750,000. So she's probably spending those now. You can lease for about $800 a month. What are they? $799 a month. $800 a month, not including your down payment. She was probably paying something pretty similar in rent. Whereas if she had been driving a car that was a $400 a month payment, let's face it, there are plenty of those, and pocketing $400 a month, and she was living here for, she was probably here for at least 3 years. 400 times 12 times 3. It's $4,800 a year times 3. This is not fun math to be doing. It's about, 14 grand? 14 grand she could have pocketed. It's half that Birkin bag. She can go get a used Birkin bag for that. Or take a really cool trip. Or go ahead and put that money towards down payment on an asset that's going to appreciate as opposed to a car that doesn't appreciate. That's the kind of stuff that kills me. That's the reason why I wanted to start talking about this stuff. And that's the stuff that people need to learn about. They don't teach you that in school. Nobody teaches you how to budget in school. You start working, you get a job, and you go knock on the bank's door and say, can I do this? Am I allowed to? And the bank looks at your credit and they look at how much money you've got in the bank, and they either tell you yay or nay. And unless you do your homework and know anything about some of this stuff, you don't know why. And you just look at your friend who's got a cooler car, cooler house, and you're like, bro, how'd you do that? Go figure it out. Nobody teaches you this stuff. So hopefully everybody shows up here. They listen to me rant and rave, because I get so irritated with all this stuff. And people educate themselves on all of it. I mean, there are YouTube videos for everything. You can build a house off of YouTube. Why not get some financial education in a gray area capitalist society, whatever the hell you want to call it? We're pretty financially conservative that way. Nobody teaches you any of this stuff. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully learn how to better use your money. Hopefully you learn how to make your money work for you, so that by the time you are 65, 70, you're not waking up thinking, oh man, I really want to retire. How much money do I need? Oh, shoot, I needed that extra $400 a month when I was in my 20s. $400 a month. Just burned on a car. And if she had pocketed that, put it in a CD, put it in a 401k, that could be the difference of retirement. Could be the difference between taking a killer vacation. Could be the difference between getting or not getting that income property. Look, if you've got money coming in the door for life with assets or something, and you're in a position where you can be like, yeah, $400 a month. Okay, I just gotta navigate my budget. Fine. There are some people who have killer jobs because they're teachers or something with a pension, and they've got set income for life. I get that. There's a certain level of stability that you have. Most of us do not have that. I don't know what the proportion of people who have jobs as secure as teachers or what have you, but most of us don't. Most of us aren't pro athletes. And even the pro athletes. Another good Freakonomics episode. There's one about pro athletes, and there was some woman, I forget what school she was from, but she used to work with all the football players, and she was like a finance, economics teacher, and she used to talk about, these players were going to be making enough money in the first 3 years of post-college that was typically equivalent to what most people make in their entire lifetime. And it got to be that the language for NFL was not National Football League, it was not for long. As in, that income is not for long. So if it's not for long, what are you going to do with all of it? I highly suggest watching the show Ballers for more evidence of that. Rock does a really good job in that. But yeah, nobody teaches you this stuff, so you're going to learn it here. Appreciation versus depreciation. Cars typically depreciate. That's bye-bye money. House typically appreciates. Typically it's just a matter of time. Don't get me wrong, that's how we got into the recession in the first place. Don't be stupid about it. But typically you will come out on top. It's just a matter of time. And how much patience and sweat do you have? And it's a way to make your money work for you. Because you work hard for it, why shouldn't it work for you? I know that's a slogan from somebody else. Can't think of who. But We're all just trying to figure it out, to have more fun, be financially successful, so we can get those Range Rovers and spend an extra $400, or cool old Defenders, or take really cool trips, or do something. But gotta find appreciating assets and understand cars, typically not one of those. I like cars, be careful. Not sure what next week's going to be about. I am so very sorry that this took me a month between episodes. Holidays do things. It'll be something. Another reason for me to rant and rave, and hopefully share more knowledge with everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I will include links to blogs, reports, other good information. Again, so sorry. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.